Hello. Welcome to our Yoga for the Creative Soul book club gathering today as we are making our way through chapter 7, connecting to the creative soul through the system of Raja Yoga as taught to us in book 2 of the Yoga Sutras. Well, all of the Yoga Sutras, the Path of Raja Yoga, but book 2 gives you the steps. And we're just extrapolating about half a paragraph from page 96 and 97 as our inspiration today, doing a deeper dive into the concept of truthfulness. Yoga names 5 restraints or yamas as a beginning of getting into the system, overarching in limiting harm. And one of the ways we limit harm is through truthfulness or satya, which is what we're talking about today. Thinking a little bit differently, maybe about truthfulness than a person usually might. As we proceed, I wish to acknowledge for each of us, wherever we may be in the world, that we are residing on native lands, that through treaty, theft, occupation, colonization has come to us. We have the privilege of living here rent-free, basically. Many of us here today are on or directly adjacent to the Haldimand Tract, which was promised to our Aboriginal people, and they have access to only 5% of the lands that through legal treaty they were given, which was theirs in the first place. That's a lot for us to live with, and we send our gratitude to them for, even though they're not on their lands, they continue to work tirelessly to protect these lands, airs, and waterways. You can learn the names and more about the history of the lands you reside upon at native-lands.ca. Yoga, well, we're acknowledging, is a 5,000-year-old tradition that began in India. It predates written work and is of the Vedas, the Upanishads, and what we're talking about today is the Yoga Sutras. Sutra literally translates as the red, and we can think of yoga as a tapestry where the threads of wisdom have woven together to create a beautiful picture of enlightened life, of living with a steady mind, of perceiving reality as it truly is through the layers of Maya or illusion. Many Eastern traditions use the same terms like Maya, samskara, karma. And so if you've studied Buddhism, Taoism, Jainism, you'll find many similar concepts. Here we are in the yama, or restraint of satya, truthfulness, and just thinking a little bit differently about truthfulness. Last week when we talked about non-stealing, we said, you're not a robber. And with truthfulness, you're probably not a liar either. But that's, that's pretty obvious. Sure, go ahead, don't tell lies. But what else might this mean? Satya is about communication and thought forms. Remember that communication happens in 2 parts. What's part 1? This is where we're thinking of being truthful. It's message sent. That's communication, message sent. I told you something, and then what happened? Part 2, message received. So as we become more adept at truthfulness, at monitoring our own monkey minds, cognition, emotion, thought, we also get better at sensing how our sent messages will be received. What is going on in the heart and mind and gut, right? In intuition of the person we're communicating with. And now as we're kind of talking about communication and thinking about truthfulness, a little doodle you can do while I'm speaking is to draw a figure on each half of a paper, figure over here, and then fill in the middle space. And if you're working through some tricky conversation, something interpersonally, you can use this time to express non-verbally, to work through some of the communication mishap that might be happening, and even depict a clearer form of communication using this expressive opportunity as a prayer, as a vision, as an intention put out there into the universe, into the ether, into collective consciousness. So the two figures, however you want to represent them, and then filling in the mid space with communication. Message sent and message received. How is this being received by the person we're communicating with? And when, as we do the trauma aware training, we talk about how trauma itself warps our ability to perceive truthfulness. So this isn't just on the outside, but this is on the inside. How clearly are we able to hear our own feelings, our own messages from the body? How clearly are we able to decode our own thoughts, emotions, needs, and dreams? And so whether it's that deeper internal place or whether it is communicating with another being, our pets, our people, we might believe that we're truthful in the message, but if we're not considering, oh, this is going to be a trigger for that person, or the last few times we had this conversation, it went this way, or I know I'm touching a pain point, or does this word mean the same thing to me as it means to the other person? We're able to deconstruct and find our way to a deeper truth, a different kind of clarity in the communication. Even though this is my idea and what I'm trying to say, and I've thought about it, how will this be received? Accountability to self in what is truly truthful, if I can say it that way, truly truthful, is also to remember that our truth is subjective. And you'll hear people use that language. Well, my truth is this. Okay, good. Good to know that's your truth. But my personal truth might differ from objective truth. And in fact, it might differ greatly. It's been said there's three sides to every story: my side of the story, their side of the story, and what really happened. They've been studying eyewitness accounts for decades, and our memories are profoundly flawed. Our feelings, our beliefs, our needs, our preconceptions will all color an experience and change that nuance of what is true. What is true for us is very different from objective reality, most, all of the time. So I mentioned moments ago about inner communication. How well are we hearing ourselves? How much are we allowing the emotions to be present without judging ourselves, without trying to change things? I mentioned traumatic encoding, where what we know about traumatic stress is that it changes our nervous system set point. So already messages received are going in with flags of danger. Everything's a little bit colored by this need to remain very safe because the world is very unsafe. This highly affects the truth of situations. So when we're able to watch ourselves for where those skews are, where am I missing reality? Where's my nervous system upregulation interfering with my ability to receive clear communication, either from within or from without? We get better and better at clarifying our relationship with truthfulness. And this ultimately helps us with our boundaries and with intimacy. Some of the toughest places to be truthful, right? It's really, really hard to share what we're actually feeling, even with ourselves, let alone with other people. And it's really tough to express our needs. And this often becomes gender specific because in uh, gender role socialization, women are taught to be nice, to smile, to not interfere and not be demanding. And if we look at the history of language, we can see all these ways that gender specific things that are actually really nice, really empowered, really beneficial to society have become insults, insults towards both genders. And then on the flip side of that, gender role assimilation has taught men to make demands and assert their point of view. So, a bit of a trap for all of us, and not a lot of truthfulness at play if we're basing something on what chromosomal patterns or genitalia a person was born with. Doesn't make a lot of sense, not objectively truthful. So, when we're out there in the world trying to acknowledge our feelings and yet express our needs, express these emotions, but conform to societal expectations, it's no wonder intimacy with self, with others, becomes so challenging. It's no wonder we compromise that more subtle sense of honesty in the interest of keeping the peace or being who we think we should be. Boundaries and intimacy. How honest are we with ourselves and with others about what's really going on in there? And that brings us back to what we're doing here in this group for mental health via yoga and expressive arts. When we express ourselves creatively, we access deeper truths, even divine truths. How often, if you've ever had a daily creative practice, how often have you had things come through you that were very unexpected in your sculpture, in your musical improvisation, in the movements that your body was even able to create and shape, in your writing? Magical and unexpected things come through, and this deeper truth is highly beneficial to our continuing personal growth, health, and healing. Simply by making time to express ourselves creatively, we are opening space for the truth of ourselves to come through. If we want to frame that as enlightenment, which is what yoga is teaching us about, unitive consciousness, access to abiding peacefulness, depth, then we can think of it as expressive arts and creative acts are practice for enlightenment, are knocking on that door of self-realization, letting the forces know that we're here and we're open and we're interested and we're listening. The reason I got into expressive arts as a psychotherapist in the first place was because of my expertise in trauma and knowing that language, self-expression through talking, although very important, by its nature creates its own blocks because words build thoughts. Words give us the chance to think about things, maybe even ruminate, not as ideal. However, some of what we're carrying with us, especially if we've been carrying a trauma from before the time the brain was fully developed, which happens when you're like 24, it takes us a long time to get all the way there, that we won't be able to express or work through something via language, that we need some nonverbal form of expression in order to share our experience and offer ourselves care and safety. The most simple way that we do this is through the body, through somatic education. So if you haven't done so yet, put the finishing touches on that expressive work, or Make some notes for yourself about what else you want to add there, and then set it aside. And we'll do a little practice to connect somatically and just check in on what's going on. So we're not looking for trauma. Keep yourself safe. We're not equipped in this group, or certainly not in a video that you may be watching after the fact, to provide you with the support to fully work this through. If you have a therapist, if you want to reach out to me for sessions one-on-one, just find me on social or connect with one of your care team members to do some of the deeper stuff. But for right now, we'll keep it light and accessible, but request some truth from inside. And all we're doing is tapping in and noticing the breath, noticing the felt sense in the body. If I wiggle my fingers and toes, do they feel like my fingers and toes? And it can sometimes be useful to bring ourselves a little closer, to actually hold places that don't feel quite as alive, right? Pressing against the legs, giving a little squeeze to the arches, the top of the feet, pulling on the toes a little bit. Coming home to the body. Hi, body. I'm listening to you. Thank you for carrying me through the world. From this breath, and perhaps from this touch, or just from settling in and tuning into the body, notice the places of comfort, the places of discomfort. You can even imagine like a sea mammal, like a dolphin, like a whale, breathing as if through a blowhole into the place of comfort, letting it fill and reach the spaces that are less accessible, less comfortable, or breathing through that blowhole into the place of discomfort, feeding it love, health, companionship. Listening to this place that you're choosing to focus on, and noticing what are those messages. Often they will not come as words, although the busy monkey mind might kick up and have lots to say. Do your best to stay with feeling. Just feel it. And if it works for you, you can begin to express or allow that space you're breathing into to express on the page. If you have lots of different media in front of you, you might mix media, magazine clippings, pastels, markers, crayons, pencil crayons, ink. But notice this part of your body that's getting the attention right now is drawn to certain colors and textures. We'll often express with a non-dominant hand in those times where we're endeavoring to stay more somatically connected, where we're endeavoring to bypass the verbal. So much of what we've learned about writing, less so these days, but still our dominant hand tends to take the logical, analytical lead. And if that's what feels safer or better for you today, stick with it. But if you want to go non-dominant hand, that is a chance to let this part of your body that you tuned into speak its truth. For those of you who have been practicing somatic education for a longer period of time, who have been in embodied practice for a while and have played this way, you can imagine actually initiating the movement from that part of the body you're focused on. So if you're focused between the clavicles, say, then maybe you're imagining a line of energy following from the clavicle down the arm to the hand and expressing there. But the movement is at the clavicle. If you're expressing from your knee, then there's that line of energy from the knee, and I say line, but for you maybe it's a wave, maybe it's a sunbeam or moonbeam, maybe it's a felt scarf, I don't know, but somehow connecting knee up the body, along the arm to the hand, so that the movement is initiated from the part of the body where the focus is. And as I already mentioned, this is much more accessible to people who've already been practicing it. If you're new to this, just ask yourself, if I could color from this part of my body, how might I do that? And invoking imagination often builds access. This is meant to be playful. This is something you are doing for yourself. So it doesn't matter if it so-called works or so-called doesn't work. This is just a game we're playing together. Every so often, check in with your breath. Whether that's breath through the breathing apparatus or breath through the blowhole. As we are taught in mindfulness, you may witness the thoughts and feelings flowing through. Emotional feelings, felt sense feelings, body feelings, but not getting wrapped up in them as the focus remains connecting your visual expression to that part of the body that you tuned into during the breathing exercise. And you can let this be fluid. You can let this be playful. If you wish for another cue or instruction, the next step could be to ask this part of the body if there were a boundary that were important to you, could you depict it somehow on this page? And then just trust what follows. Is it a switch in the technique? If you were fluid, does it get crunchy? If you were using green, does it now want red? Whatever it might be, trust that inclination. You don't have to do this. It's an optional step. If there were a boundary you wanted me to know about, what might it be? This could come through as well in symbols. That non-dominant hand does know its letters, and it can, in its own clumsy, harder to read way, express verbally. That's okay. It's okay. Whatever comes through. Acknowledging as you're putting these finishing touches on the boundary expression, is there a change in breath? Is there a change in your visual perception? Is there a change in how you are taking in sounds or aromas around you? Is there a change in which parts of your body you can sense versus which parts seem more numb or less accessible? Not trying to do anything with it, just noticing, not judging, comfortable in the witness. This is your body, your creativity, your expression, your soul. And if you wish to play along with another step, the next step might be, what do you want me to know about how you feel? And just notice how that comes out of you. How does that play? What arises? Not judging it, not trying to make it anything, just flowing. What do you want me to know? And if you've lost access, if you've gotten a bit more into the creativity and a little bit less in the body, come back to that felt sense, that blowhole restructure that flow to wherever in the body you're initiating movement from. And we can add just one more. This might seem like the same thing. Sometimes this is the same thing, sometimes this is a different thing. What do you need right now? And just let the body answer through color, through movement on the page, through symbols, or through its own shakily lettered words with the non-dominant hand. The part of my body where I'm focusing. What do you need right now? And continue with this as I do just a little more speaking on satya, truthfulness, and communication. Our endeavor today was a very different kind of communication and exploring a very different kind of inner truth. This is a practice you can revisit again and again. You can elaborate it. You can make it your own in various ways. It is enough during the day just to pause for a breath, do a quick body scan with curiosity, listen, so-called listen, hear from within. What is the body asking for? What is the body asking for? And this, as part of our trauma recovery, mental health recovery, is a very beneficial tool because the body is continually communicating its needs to us. Sometimes immediate needs, sometimes long ago historical needs. And the responses required are often very simple. I need some proprioception. Get me the heavy blanket, pile some pillows on me. Even if you're at your desk, right? Even if you're doing so, you're answering emails and you're feeling the stress of that, you can shove a pillow up against your chest, hold it in your lap, and just feel a little more containment in the world, right? Sometimes the body will say, need a deep breath. It's mid-afternoon and I'm not even a liter into drinking water yet today. Very simple things. Repeating a few of our treasured affirmations, all is well, Om Mani Padme Hum, whatever it might be. The more we ask, the clearer the communication becomes, verbally or otherwise, and the more we're able to settle into that inner truth, respecting emotions, hearing the needs, asserting the boundaries, whether internal or external. There is always a next trauma aware training coming up. This one is at the end of the month, live, potentially 40 minutes outside of Buffalo on the Canadian side. So remember live trainings? I know lots of you have done trauma training with me live and in person as well as online. But that's something that we can get into right now. Some of what we did today has piqued your interest. What we're going to talk about next week in the group is taking an activity from page 97 back to non-harm, that guiding principle of the yamas, connecting to our creative selves in the absence of harm and the endeavor towards non-harm, non-violence to ourselves. You're not a robber, you're not a liar, you're not a violent person in the world, but harm comes through in many different ways. And before we completely close out today's recording, oftentimes I will express along with you. I apologize, I didn't today. But if there's anybody who wishes to share for those who will be watching the recording later, just a chance to open up the floor there before we close out the day? A bit of movement, but I never know if that's somebody capping markers or somebody about to unmute their mics. Today was deep, quiet, and personal. Yeah, hi, Chris.
I'll share mine. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but there was the first initial exercise with the breathing I'm doing on the two sides. So there were like two figures. One was smaller than the other. One was bigger. So kind of like small self, big self, higher self. But then I chose to work on the small self for the rest of the exercises, and I won't know what it means till later.
So true. What a great reminder for all of us. Thanks, Chris. Because some of this expressive stuff, this is in the tradition of psychologically in the tradition of a vision quest, where we are then meant to reflect upon what arose for many weeks to truly get the message. Your expressions will be similar, everybody, as are mine. Likewise, our dream life. Yeah, so thanks, Chris, for sharing that, and not seeing anybody too fast on that unmute button. Oh, hi, Bonnie.
Oh, I have to give my visual hi. I can share. Where are we? So this was the communication part, how communication is met, and either with a wall of resistance, so it just ricochets back off, or the person's distracted, so it just kind of goes blah, blah, blah. I don't know how much they're actually receiving, or distorted based on past experiences and the beliefs that we formed. And then it just brings to question as a mirror reflection for myself when I'm communicating how resistant, distorted, or distracted am I while I'm communicating and while I'm receiving communication. So then when we went to the breathing and focusing on your body, for me, it was all on the lower back, pelvis, psoas, sacrum, that whole area feels super tight. So I found some quick collage, which says throwing in the trash will cost. And so it's just all this tightness with the black and the red. And then though the green is about introducing some movement and the arm stretching out, it's headless. I'm headless. So, and the pink energy to soften the movement. And the message was to get out of my limiting complaints focus and focus more on solutions and movement and what I want instead of where I am. And then what do you need right now in the non-dominant hand came out as slow, kind breaths, to do it with kindness instead of being bossy about it, and be held by my yoga swing while stretching so I can feel that feeling of being held. And the proprioception thing you mentioned really helped me realize that, oh yeah, that's something I need and do quite often without realizing it. So I'll grab an extra puffy coat just so I can hold it on my lap.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then water.
So important.
Yeah.
Water. Like, we underestimate the power of staying hydrated.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Bonnie. And thank you, everybody, for joining us here today live or today on the recording. As always, reach out to me with your feedback, with your questions. Please do post to the group as we share support and inspiration in that way and so many other ways.